Okay, this is the 1B screencast. What's listed as pages 3 through 27, summary, paraphrase, and quotation. What we're going to do, this one's not going to be too awful long. These will get more involved with uploads and things such as those in the future, other activities. But for right now, we're just trying to get everybody on the same page, make sure everyone can get in Revel, take the quizzes, and get sort of used to the process, as it were. So I've pulled up the online edition of the book, and what we're going to basically do is just highlight what's for us, especially what's important out of 3 through 27. What do we really want to get out of this? And so remember that big picture. Remember, we're in an academic book right now, which means we're going to, for purposes of this book, it's going to define it as going off of textual sources. All right, so we're going to use textual sourcing to back up our interpretations, our analysis in this first case of how you would break down to back up your interpretation of an essay. What does it mean to have an interpretation of an essay and a thesis statement? All that sort of stuff. So writing and reading across the curriculum, this is how it starts out. Remember, this differs from approaches that a lot of schools are using right now, where they would incorporate more first person writing, more of your own experiences, a narrative essay. Last summer I learned patience when I went fishing with Uncle Buck, right? And we would, if we were doing that, we would work on how to incorporate that idea into the whole paper, not just at the end. A lot of people are still doing this in high school. So if you did do a bunch of that, notice that we're shifting gears, or we're shifting gears away from that. And we're going to talk about first person isn't always wrong. It's really more of it really deals more with audience than anything else. We'll talk about the evolution of all that later. It's not really important for right now. Just think the progression of this course is, can you tell us what's going on? Can you tell me what's going on in one essay? Right? Can you summarize it? Then the next paper, the next major paper, the critique, judgments, right? You got to know what's going on in the essay. You got to keep that summary skill, but then you're going to have to tell me, well, what is good and also bad about the essay. And that third major essay, remember what you want to do is incorporate multiple textual sources. And that's really the reason we're going to this book, or we've already went to this book for this time, right? Students are having a whole lot of trouble with the synthesis, the combining, putting together of different textual sources, right? So remember, that's not a research paper that we're working to. We're going to work on research strategies, a systematic evaluation of sources later on. These are sources already given to us. We're going to incorporate some sources. We're going to synthesize them into the essay. Okay, so this corresponds to page 3 in the text, right? Our learning objectives for this time. And remember, y'all have the embedded video. Of course, your book does not. What is a summary, right? Summary, brief restatement, right? A brief restatement in your own words of the content, but of course you can't summarize everything. You're going to have to pick and choose, so you're going to have to interpret on a higher order, as it were, right? You're going to have to, that's going to call for the analysis I was just talking about. We're going to break essays into textual chunks. Right? Can a summary be objective? We're going to give the appearance of objectivity at times, but we're going to feel free. We're not going to be straight objective. Some of you might summarize the same essay in different ways. Remember, what's important is that you can back it up. That's what's important for us. Remember, we want to think like lawyers, not as if we're taking a philosophy class or something like that. Using the summary, well, you show that you understand it, right? You'd be surprised how many people try to source things and it just doesn't make sense from my perspective, and in the future, from your other readers' perspective, from your if you give a presentation, people don't seem to know what's going on. And a lot of times that is the case because the actual author or presenter, in some cases, doesn't really understand what he or she is reading, right? So you have to be able to do that. You have to build credibility for your audience to start out with. All right, and then as we flip forward here, and I'm new to all this Rebel stuff too. This seems clunky at times, so we're going to skip over this quiz business, and we're going to go to what would be on pages 6 and 7 of the book, the critique for reading the summary, the reading process. Okay, now we want to start paying a little extra attention, right? And we see here, do they give us examine the context? This is the blue box stuff in the book on pages 6 and 7. So as we go forward here, pay attention. Generally speaking, in this book, what you want to do is pay attention to the blue box stuff. Let's see if we have more of this here. No, that looks like it's cutting into the quiz too quickly. Let me see if we pick this back up or not. Oh, I did. It listed all the how to write summary starts after that. Let's think about reading still for a second. This is what I think is useful about reading. First, find a place where you can hopefully have some quiet and turn off your phone. If your phone's buzzing all the time, even keeping it on quiet, it's going to distract you. And you don't need to work on this for long chunks. You can think about doing it in short chunks. If you know you can't concentrate on what you read, think about doing this maybe just 5 minutes at a time till you can build up more concentration. All right? So, sit up. It seems to be helpful for people to not read on screens. At least they test a little bit better. Currently, yours may be the generation to change this, but so far I haven't seen any data that shows that. And for whatever reason, it seems to be the case that if your body is in correct alignment, if you are sitting up, right, if you have, remember those chairs that I believe we talked about that have the lumbar support, if you're driving your car and you push your lumbar support, put you in a natural position, seems uncomfortable, but what it's actually doing is putting that natural curve in the base of your spine, and it seems to settle people's minds down, put it that way. And if you wanted to think about it in terms of probably the people that write most about this sort of thing are the Eastern people, like the Zen Buddhists and so forth. And they'll talk about it in terms of meditation. You don't want it to really try too hard, if that makes sense. You want to focus, but not just sit there with this fierce, like you're squinting your eyebrows together, constant attention. All right. Try to have things quiet, and if your words start running together, that's bad, right? You just want to go back to what you were doing, right? Go back to what you were doing. All right. So this last, the bullet here, it says read actively and recursively. Well, take notes, right? It's okay to write in your book. That's one of the reasons that we have at least kept a print copy of the book and haven't ditched it to electronic, all the electronic stuff. Everybody sees, if you didn't see this, you can go back, click on this, and you can put highlights in here electronically. That's fun too. That's a way to do it. It's just, to me, it's just faster if you write. Write down, underline, use a highlighter. If in the future you think one of our authors is just full of crap, well, then you can write, this is what I do, just write author is full of BS, or just put BS in the margins. It shows you're interacting with the text. This should not affect, if you have a full-on book and you didn't get them from the bookstore and all that, then it doesn't affect the resale value when you do that. And in fact, if you nose around at the when you do transfer to a larger place, usually it's the case that students who have been there for a while, in the subjects that they aren't so keen about. So say if you're a science person and you don't really care about the world literatures. Used to be people would have to take 2 literatures and they'd almost always fill those with a world lit 1 and 2. Well, what those students would do, say it's a mechanical engineer, mathematician, something like that, they go into the bookstores, good couple of weeks, go into the used book section, and there would just be rows upon rows upon rows of these really large world literature 1 books. And so then what they would do is hunt through all the used books and see who took the best notes, right? Who underlined, highlighted, whatever, made questions, wrote questions in the margins, the right ones, right? The right amount of material. And so, of course, if nothing or not a whole lot is underlined, highlighted, and so on, then for these particular kind of people, for their interest, they didn't want that one, not enough stuff. They're going to have to go through and read everything, right? Well, same thing on the other side of it. If everything is underlined, highlighted, and so forth, that book is no good either, because they might as well just get a clean copy and start all over if they're going to have to read everything. Well, same thing for you, right? If remember, as some of you specialize and you turn into business majors or what have you, you're going to have a big old project at the end of the semester. You don't want to have to go back and read, and when you're going again through your material from weeks 2, 3, 4, and so on, you don't want to have to just reread the material. That's not really effective highlighting. Go back and try to figure out a way that works for you just to get the important stuff, right? Let the little stuff go, get the big picture stuff. Okay, so that's important. And again, a lot of students now just cannot concentrate, right? This has always been the case, actually. It just kind of varies by degrees over the decades. This is why the physical posture is important, right? So try not to lay in your bed, try not to on the couch, all that sort of stuff. Try to, if you can, not be around situations where your little brothers and sisters are constantly nagging at you, kids, what have you. If you got to go to the library, you got to go to the library. And remember, a little bit a day is better than a whole lot at once. So if you can get 5 good minutes of concentration, hey, then you build from there. If you have a bad day or two, don't worry about it. That's going to happen. Don't get frustrated. Because what most people do, people think when this happens to you, you think you're just no good at it. Trust me, everybody does this from time to time. It's getting a little bit later in the day now, and I get up pretty early. So now if, let's say, my brain starts drifting off on this last bullet, or just because we're on how to write summaries here, it says every article you read, what's going on with so-and-so this weekend? That's drifting off, right? My eyes will still follow the words, but I'm not really understanding any of it. That's very common. If you can't just kind of catch yourself doing that, go back without getting frustrated. Then it's time for a break, right? Even if you just went a couple of minutes, over time, if it seems to be you can just go a couple of minutes before this happens, that's your baseline. That's where you're starting. That's just how it is, right? But you can build this up. It's not that big of a deal. Take a break, and break doesn't mean go right back to your phone and check everything that's on your phone. Just walk around a little bit. Walking will help settle your mind, right? Walking will help settle your mind. Take some breaths, whatever it takes, right? Give yourself just a little break and then go back to it and try it again. It's a process, right? You will get better at the process. And if we go back again to these, I think it's the Zen Buddhists that say, most of them say, most people shouldn't concentrate, even people at the top of the game, like the practitioners are in the meditative sects. You can't go more than 20 minutes, right? And it really intense concentration. That doesn't mean you can't do lower level tasks for much, much longer, right? So don't feel you need to sit there for hours, right? Little bitty bursts are going to be better on a more, recurrent basis. You can build it up way past 5 minutes or whatever. All right, so how to write summaries, you get the guidelines here. What we're doing is we're summarizing a whole paper. The book wants to talk about summary as a skill right now. We are going to do that, but we don't have a full-on summary essay as we're going to write, which y'all are going to actually like better when you see what it is. I'm skipping over this quiz now. The demonstration summary. So we have an example summary. It's what we're getting at here. And in the demonstration summary, the thing to point out is this is a little bit better to do in class because the demonstration summary kind of tries to test your reading comprehension. It tries to trick you. And like a lot of things that happen in the academy, it tricks you out in the open, right? Because if you've read this, look at the title, The Baby in the Well, the Case Against Empathy. And if we're going over this in class, I will sometimes be somewhat evil, and I'll get all the, I'll ask the students if empathy is bad, and they'll say, no, it's always good. And they'll talk about how this is actually an essay talking about the benefits of empathy and how we should all be more empathetic. All right. But this, of course, is not what the essay is saying. Right? What the essay is saying is, just as the title said, we don't always need to be so empathetic, especially for social policy. Right? And the big example here is, it's on page 11 in the book. It's the Natalie Holloway stuff going back to 2005 was, I believe, the date of this young woman who went down to, I think it was Aruba, ran into a bad crowd there. It sounds like a bad couple of guys, disappears, probably got murdered, is how it sounded. In this case, it just dominated the news coverage. All the time, it was 24/7, whatever network you turned it to, Natalie Holloway. What is going on with the disappearance of Natalie Holloway? And I think something just happened where they found her body. I'm not really sure. Somebody told me that, or I read it online, which you always take with a grain of salt. But anyway, what his point is in the essay is, while all this was going on and America was paying attention to this, we weren't paying attention to a much greater evil in the world, and that was Darfur in Africa, where a good chunk of people just got killed, right? Just got ran out of the country. This is a genocide, right? And I think we talked about some of the problematic stuff with genocide. I mean, just how difficult it is to actually do genocide and how you have to do it on the cheap and all that sort of stuff. So which makes it even more devastating with all the machetes and chopping all sorts of, not just people, little kids and all that sort of stuff too, polluting the well, just bad. So from the author's perspective, what this author is saying is, well, if we weren't, Paul Bloom, if we weren't so enamored with the Natalie Holloway, maybe something, the implication is, better would have happened with Darfur. So we're going to get past this essay to the reread highlight section, and this is for my mind, this is marking it up a little bit too much, is what they have the student author doing. But this is how most people start, though. They usually overdo it a little bit and they need to back off. This is where we want to go. Dividing into stages of thought. This is what we are going to do. You're not, of course, going to do this essay, but the essays that we read, you have to, we're going to call this a kind of a minor analysis. You're going to break them up. You're going to have larger distinctions. You're not going to have 8 distinctions. But in my opinion, in the student's opinion anyway, Section 1 really just deals with the definition and importance of empathy. You may reread that now and disagree with that. You may think it goes on a little more, a little less. Maybe it's doing something else besides defining, or maybe you want to make a further distinction about defining and stressing the importance. Maybe you can come up with a way to incorporate this stuff into Section 2. Maybe you think paragraphs 1 through 8 all pretty much are about defining. Right? Students will have varying ideas about how to analyze, to break up, right, an essay. So it's not, we aren't going to have as many sections. What's important is to start doing this. If you are in some of your social science classes, they tend to do this with a section title. We do not have section titles in MLA, but if you've ever noticed the difference in paper formats, they will tend to do stuff like this. The APA format will. We stress topic sentences way more than APA format does. Although you should still have clear topic sentences. So when it says write a brief summary into each stage of thought, let's skip over that. Where it goes to, this is what we really want to take for today. Write a thesis. A brief summary of the entire passage. And we want to go, it shows you how the student is kind of struggling through this. And now let's just take a minute here. This is on page 18. The final draft. The final draft of the thesis. This is too long. Right? In The Baby and the Whale, The Case Against Empathy, Paul Bloom argues that while empathy is important in fostering positive human relationships, we should prefer reason as a guide to social policy because empathy's focus on the distress of one individual may blind us to the suffering of thousands whose names and faces we do not know. I want to cut this down into just the subject and the idea, and I'm going to say the rest you probably could get out in topic sentences, at least in the most concise manner possible. Probably doesn't need to be included here, but it's not wrong too. It just makes it quite large, or long anyway, for the thesis statement. So remember this for right now. In The Baby and the Whale, the case against empathy. Subject idea, subject idea, subject idea. For a summary essay, your subject always has to be the essay. That's what you're writing about by definition in a summary essay, right? So that has to be the subject, right? So The Baby and the Whale, the case against empathy. Bloom argues qualification, while empathy is important in fostering positive human relationships. What he really argues is that we should prefer reason as a guide to prefer reason over empathy as a guide to social policy. And then there's another qualification, because, the why we should do that, right? So, in The Baby and the Whale, the case against empathy, Bloom argues we should prefer reason as a guide to social policy, right? Because empathy can lead you astray, is the idea, right? So this is the kind of thing we're going to work on quite a bit in the class. How can we get the idea down in as few words as possible? Keep our thesis statements rather crisp. Same thing into the topic ideas, so that we want to write well, right? And part of the thing that we want to do is just we want to write clear. Don't need to use as many words as possible. Don't really need to use a whole lot of big words. If a little one will do, or an uncomplicated one will do anyway. And as we keep, let's shift gears a little bit into write the first draft of the summary. This is not, they're making the book, the authors of the book, Burns and Rosen, are making a distinction between the longer summary and the shorter summary. Well, our first whole essay is a summary essay. We'll talk about using summary as a skill. We'll be doing it in the next paper. So we can kind of pause on that a little bit, and I think this will do it. You're right, yeah, this will take us up to summarizing graphs, charts, and tables. We skip over that for right now. Okay, so that concludes the first screencast here. Again, don't get used to this. This is a little shorter than what we'll normally do on our B days, and normally will involve a lot, at least one, but maybe a few uploads, depending upon what reading day it is. So watch this. If you have any questions, zap me or message me. And remember, you need to do your quizzes before the next class, for that Thursday class, all right? For 6 o'clock for us, right? Do those before in Rebel. Let me know if there are any problems with Rebel. We did have some problems this weekend in terms of the college, getting into the canvas shells and so on. My understanding is that's all fixed now. Hopefully that stays fixed at least through the week. All right. Again, message me if you have any questions.